This is the closest thing to Montana and Young's 49ers offensively that I've seen since then. So I'm giving the 49ers, I'm giving them an A+ this year. Everything's gone right. They also, the fact that they earned the right to not worry about the 17th game of the season is another sign that everything went perfectly for them this year.
I'd give them an A, and I'd reserve the plus. But offensively, it is an A+. Like, you're exactly right. And statistically, historically, those numbers would back you up. This is the second best offense in terms of total points since 1994. The 1994 team scored 505 points. This team has scored 491. That's the second most ever by a San Francisco 49ers team. So offensively, you look up and down. I mean, there's 4 guys with over 1,000 scrimmage yards. Christian McCaffrey, and what I think is kind of flown a little bit under the radar, literally led the league in rushing every single week of the season. From week 1, he was the leader until week 18, in which he didn't even play. He was the leader. Christian McCaffrey had over 2,000 scrimmage yards this season and has been maybe the best offensive player in the NFL. The 49ers offensively are incredible. And so I just wonder how people are feeling, because they're not going to play this weekend. We're going to watch 6 different wild card games and figure out who the Niners are going to play. But I do wonder what the expectations are of this team, because they've seen in recent memory a 49ers team go to the Super Bowl. I don't think the 2019 team was as good as this one. Might have been a little bit better defensively, but certainly not offensively. Is it Super Bowl or bust? Or, Steiny, do you expect them to just give it a go and we'll run it back next year and they have a great chance? I think there's a lot more pressure on this season than from what our conversation was pre-show than you do.
Well, there's obviously pressure on them because they're 12-5. They were the best team in the NFC. They got a shot to win the Super Bowl. They're definitely one of the best teams in the league. But here's what I was really thinking about, and I know 49er fans aren't going to like this, and maybe I saved this for when Goo wasn't here on purpose, because I know he'd want to throw a brick at me. Reality of the situation is they got two cracks at it, at least.
2 more?
Yeah. And what I mean by that is, believe it or not, I no longer look at the 49ers as, okay, this season. I look at the 49ers as the next 2 seasons, believe it or not. I think they have a chance to, obviously the playoffs are starting now, and they have a chance to win it. So they're either going to win it or they're going to get beat. Surprise, surprise, Steiny. Yeah, you're a real smart guy. But if the 49ers get beat in the postseason this year, they're going to run it back for the most part. There's nothing else they can do. They've been one of the best teams in football for 2 years. They got a quarterback under their control, making no money. The reality is, if they beat Philly and then they get nudged by Dallas in the NFC Championship game, or they lose to Baltimore in the Super Bowl, their top 8 players are still gonna be back. Purdy will be back. Kittle will be back. Ayuk will be back. McCaffrey will be back. Warner will be back. Bosa will be back. Greenlaw will be back. We'll see about Trent Williams. But what I'm getting at is this team's not going anywhere for a couple years until they gotta pay Purdy. And what I'm saying is, if they get beat by Philly or Tampa Bay, I'm not saying it's not going to hurt. I'm not saying it's all going to be okay. But what I'm telling you is the reality of the situation is they're going to come back next year with essentially the same team, because they're really good, and they will have just happened to get beat in the postseason.
But we talk about all the time how there's special years. And I don't know, maybe the Niners could be better next year than this year. But with everything that's gone right in terms of health, like you just laid out, I kind of feel like this has to be the year. And I know we say that oftentimes, but no, like if you look up and down compared to the Niners have won 5 Super Bowls, right?
Yeah.
As a franchise.
Yep.
You look at the 49ers teams that this team statistically is compared against, like they're in that group. The 49ers have a plus 193 point differential. That is the 6th best of any 49ers team ever. Now, 2 of the top 5 teams in front of them went on to win the Super Bowl. 3 of them didn't. I think at least 4 of them won a playoff game. But this is a Niners team that, compared to the rest of the NFL, outside of maybe Baltimore, but even the Ravens, stands head and shoulders above everyone. Like, in comparison to the rest of the NFL, and especially the NFC, this is a team that should expect to win the Super Bowl. And if they don't, I just believe it's going to be difficult to somehow be better next season because of all the things that have gone right and all the players that have performed at an optimal level. And I think part of the reason why they're as good as they are this year, why they've been able to remain as focused as they have, is because of the heartbreak that they faced last season. And to deal with that again is something that I don't really want to consider at this point. But heading into the playoffs, I do believe everyone should feel like this team should win the Super Bowl. I mean, this team is better than any Kyle Shanahan team that I've witnessed. Their defense is, like, if you look up and down, they've certainly allowed a lot of points, but they're a top 5 group, any way you slice it. I don't know if they're the most balanced team in the NFL, but they're definitely the most explosive. They're definitely the most dangerous, and they're definitely a team that I believe should not expect anything less than a Super Bowl.
No, I mean, and here's what I'm saying. You're absolutely right. They've had great fortune with the injuries this year, and that next year anything could happen. And you're right. I'm not saying that next year is going to be just like this year, but what I'm saying is that maybe next year they'll be ravaged by injury. I'm not sure. All I'm saying is, to me, the fact of the matter is, you're going to the playoffs this year. Yeah, you have an excellent opportunity to certainly get to the Super Bowl. You'll win the Super Bowl or you won't, or you'll get beat. But next year, I'm just saying, we're probably going to see essentially the same team again. And that doesn't mean they're going to be healthy, but that is the way I look at the Niners, believe it or not. I'm not saying it won't be a disappointment, but if they get beat by Baltimore in the Super Bowl, let's just say, the offseason's going to be painful, no doubt. Everybody's going to be disappointed. But then you go into the offseason and say, how do we get over Baltimore next year? How do we get better than Baltimore? How do we become... Last year, and I know this is not the way that you draw it up, but you got beat by Philly last year in the NFC Championship game, okay? You spent all year proving you're better than Philly, all right? And now you're better than Philly. You're the best team in the NFC. You weren't last year. Now you're the best team in the NFC. You go to the Super Bowl. If you get beat by the Baltimore Ravens, then you go back to the, not drawing board. You don't have to go back to the drawing board. You say, how do we get better than the Ravens by next year? Because we're already the best team in the NFC. I look at this as a 2-year window. I really do. And again, it doesn't put any less urgency on this year because I think they can win it this year. But I just think if we look at it realistically, I don't think this team's going anywhere.
I don't think they are either, but also, Steiny, if you're talking about a 2, and we're really talking, including this season, like a 3-year, until the end of Brock Purdy's rookie contract, you have a chance to do something that's incredibly special, and it's not just, like, you're talking about competing for Super Bowls for the next 2 seasons. So, I mean, look, the only reason that I would feel, I guess, questioning of whether or not they can win it, it would be because, if you just look at the quarterbacks throughout history, Brock Purdy would be in elite, like, only 3-person company when it comes to winning Super Bowls at the age that he has and the timing in his career. But if you're just looking at this Niners team and what they've been able to accomplish this season, I mean, they have just ran roughshod over teams. And I know that they've run into a couple of rough patches and they got beat by a Baltimore team on Christmas Day. But and I'm going to wash away Week 18. So this is essentially a 12-4 team that has the best point differential, that is offensively, when they're at full strength, virtually unstoppable. I mean, the only way that they've hurt them, the only way they've lost is when they beat themselves. And that's, I guess, maybe the only reason that people have reservations about the 49ers is they feel like they could beat themselves. But there's no team that I think if the Niners play their best, like who's going to beat them? If the Niners have their A game, if you're talking about the Niners being an A+, and they play an A+ game, I don't think there's any team that if they play their A+ game.
I think the only team I could think of would be Baltimore. I think, to me, and obviously, if two teams play A+ games, then two teams against each other can't really play their A+ games, if you know what I mean. Like, something will happen. But what I'm saying is, I give the Baltimore Ravens a chance. If you told me the Ravens are better than the 49ers, I'd say it's possible. Like, they might be better than the Niners.
I think they're more balanced, but I think the Niners probably are still better just because offensively they have so many different things going for them, and defensively they're obviously good.
Chris A on the YouTube chat, one of my guys, doesn't kind of understand my logic.
Okay,
here's the way I fan or watch games.
Okay.
So the San Francisco 49ers got beat last year by the Eagles, and let's go back to the beginning of the year. They had two quarterbacks get hurt, and here came Brock Purdy, and he quarterbacked the second half of the season. And we all had to say, wow, he looks pretty good. He looks pretty good. He got hurt against the Eagles. He comes back at the start of the season. I always try to remember what I was saying at the start of the season. And what I was saying at the start of the season was, if you're telling me that Brock Purdy, a guy who was the 7th round pick, who quarterbacked 8 games last year, 6 in the regular season, 2 playoff games before getting hurt, are you really telling me that Brock Purdy, a guy who's quarterbacked 8 games, is going to lead the 49ers to the Super Bowl this year? Like, that's asking a lot. Is the way I went into the year. I expected more bumps. I expected more setbacks for Brock Purdy. I didn't expect him to look quite as good as he did over the course of the whole season. So now this is the way I look at it, Chris A., is, you know what? They can definitely, and I'm not saying that I just came to this conclusion. It was coming over. They can definitely win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. That was a question at the beginning of the year if he would have taken a step back. So now I've seen Purdy play 16, 17 games in a full season. I'm like, well, they can definitely win a Super Bowl with Purdy. And oh, by the way, Purdy's going to be here next year. And again, I'm not saying I'm excusing a playoff loss this year that I think's coming. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying realistically, this team's got a 2-year window just because of the Purdy contract, and they got some wiggle room.
That's if you believe that Purdy is the dude.
I do, don't you?
Yeah, but I also think that if he wins all right, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. Those are the 3 quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls at age 24 or younger.
All right.
That's who Brock Purdy would be in company with.
Right.
If you think that he's a Hall of Famer, then yeah, your window's open for 2 years. Well, it's open for longer than 2 years. Like, they're going to be, if Brock Purdy is what he has displayed himself to be this season.
Let's just say he is this year.
Then your window's open for longer than 2 years. Like, if you got a Hall of Fame quarterback, and I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is, but I'm saying if he wins a Super Bowl, that's the company that he is included in.
Well, no doubt. But if my feeling is, let's say Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl this year. Let's just say next year, just for kicks. This year they lose to the Ravens in the Super Bowl by 1 point. They come back and win it next year. Now you got to pay Purdy, right?
Yeah, Moses Moody misses a kick.
You got it. So
Jake, I know.
I don't know if Purdy's a Hall of Famer or not. I just know right now, with this team and this personnel around him, they can win a Super Bowl. Now, I don't know if I'm not willing to say 3 years from now that if Brock Purdy's making $39-40 million a year, which forces them to lose a weapon or two, I don't know what that team looks like. I don't know how good that team can be. But what I do know is for the next 2 years, we're going to have all these weapons and Brock Purdy under a great number. Steinmetz is saying the 49ers could win 2 in a row. That's right, I guess. Maybe I'll put it that way.
Yeah, well, and that's why.
And if they don't and if they don't win it this year, I know people are going to be bummed, but it's not the end of the world.
It's going to feel like it, though.
I know it will, but trust me, as a guy who can often be passionless, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, but I got news for you. We're coming back next year as the favorites still.
Agreed, but, well, I don't know if they'd be the favorites if they lost early in the playoffs, but if the Niners are as you say they are, which is the best team that you've seen since the 90s, right?
Offense.
The best offense since 94.
Okay.
You're telling me we're going to have to wait, I'm going to quickly do the math here, so I carry the 6, 30 years for another offense like this? Like that's the importance that I'm talking about with capitalizing on this season.
Well, keep in mind they could have this offense next year. Like when I talk about the Montana young offenses, that incorporates, 3 to 5 years of just incredible offensive performance.
Incredible.
Yeah, no, you're right. But that also included Joe Montana. And again, if you think Brock Purdy is of that ilk, then to me it isn't just a 2-year, like you're going to have a longer window.
Right. But what I'm saying is right now, you're going to have a window that's open, even if Brock Purdy isn't Joe Montana, Steve Young, John Elway, or
I would lean
Tom
towards
Brady.
no. That's very hard to be one of those guys.
Oh, here we go.
Huh?
See, this is my kind of question, but
What?
if the 49ers don't win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, do you still pay Purdy? That's even one that's a little too far down the road, even for me at this point.